so much to cover, such little time. So let's get to at least this story here in the 6 o'clock hour. Las Vegas homeowner defending his family from this armed criminals, plural. So the Constitution proves that we have an inalienable rights and an inalienable right to defend ourselves. That's called self-defense. We have that right. The Constitution gives us. It doesn't get. We're endowed certain inalienable rights by a creator. That's what the Constitution says, and it's made very clear that you have the right to self-defense. But despite that, it's becoming increasingly clear that many progressive run cities, right here in Normal, okay, it's a progressive run city. I've had somebody in studio, Chad Burke, he told me about a time where he defended himself using jujitsu, and he was the one who was arrested and had to answer to that arrest. The Normal Police Department arrested him. So, but he was the one defending himself. And the judge in that case here in the town of Normal, he actually says, Chad, I'm sorry that this happened to you, and our justice system did wrong by you by arresting you, charging you. The charges were dropped later, but here we have another story, a progressive run city, Los Angeles, and you have no right to protect yourself from criminals that may subsequently cause harm to you. You have no right to self-defense in progressive run cities. That's very clear here in the town of Normal. I talked to Chad Burke for 3 hours about how he was arrested because he was the one who was defending himself and his family right outside his home against somebody who stabbed him 19 times, I think it was. So a man, and this is out of Los Angeles, with a concealed carry permit revoked just days after he used that firearm to defend himself and his family from would-be robbers outside his home in Las Vegas. It was all captured on tape. Now, to say the very least, it's extremely backward when you have laws that interfere with the ability of law-abiding citizens to defend themselves against criminals. That it's extremely backward, and that's the very least of what I could say this is. It's backwards. It's wrong. His name is Vince Ricci. Vince Ricci is his name, and he believes that the decision was made because of his use of gun to protect his family. So, however, the sheriff's department claimed it was because he yelled at officers who showed up to investigate several days after the incident occurred. So, because he yelled at officers, that's why they're taking away his concealed carry. They're saying it's not because he used his gun to protect him and his family. They're saying it's because he yelled at officers who showed up to investigate. And if anything, I mean, yeah, of course he's yelling. Of course he's irate. He just almost died. These people were armed criminals. They were trying to rob him. They would have been robbers had he not opened fired on them. But Vince was forced to defend himself and his family in his LA home. That would be pretty traumatic. And if the officers are, being, um, if they're poking their nose around, he's a victim. Of course, he's going to act out. Maybe he might even yell at an officer. Um, so Vince, he was forced to defend him and his family inside his LA home. To thank him for his valiant effort, the LAPD presented him with the key to the city. Psych, that's not actually what happened. They took his gun permit away because he yelled at some some officers. Okay, because he yelled, they said, "Oh, we're going to take away your concealed carry." And let us get this straight. Officers, they didn't like getting a stern talking to, so now they've attempted to strip somebody's Second Amendment right away. That's what I'm understanding so far here. Since when do you have the power to do that? Just because you yelled at some officers, they're going to take away your Second Amendment right and take away your concealed carry license. So drivers yell at cops all of the time, but they don't have their power to drive. Their driving privilege is taken away, and driving is a privilege. It's not a right. It's not covered in the Constitution, right? You have the right to, or the uh, to pursue happiness, right? That driving could fall under that. But drivers yell at cops all of the time. And these drivers, they don't get their cars taken away. This is a joke. It's a joke. So, what did Vince say? He said, after successfully defending my home and my family and my 5-month old child, California has now suspended my Second Amendment rights. According to the Daily Mail, Vince previously blasted Los Angeles officers for sloppy police work. Wow. So on November 4th of this year, after Vince returned home, two armed men, this is how it all kind of played out. Two armed men jumped his fence and tried to force their way inside of his residence. In an attempt to defend his family that was inside, Vince reached for his gun and started a shootout with the intruders. This is what footage shows. People sweep it under the rug because it doesn't suit their political agenda. The fact is evil will always exist. That's what Vince says. He says, "Look, it's always gonna exist. I might as well have a gun." Um, so Vince also claims his home was broken into on in June of this year. His car was broken into prior to that in May. On November 3rd, just one night prior to the shootout, Vince actually saw a group of criminals driving around with no license plates and that had been targeting homes in the area. So they're 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 staking out houses in the area. So the National Rifle Association, the NRA, defended his use of the gun, and they, you know, said that it was wrong that the LAPD stripped his ability to carry a gun anymore. The CCL, they took that away. So here's what the NRA says in a statement. Their spokesperson said it in a statement. His decisive actions to protect his wife and daughter embody the core principles that NRA members fight for every day. It's reprehensible that California is shredding his Second Amendment rights after he defended his family. Governor Gavin Newsom and Gascon, who's the state's attorney there in LA, their pro criminal policies have transformed Los Angeles and the wider state into what resembles a war zone. Wow. The NRA stands with Vince and every responsible gun owner in California, firmly committed to defending their rights to protect their families and their communities. A right to self defense should ensure that all potential victims have the ability to protect themselves, and police officers should be empowering citizens to do that. That's what's really screwed up here, is that the police officers should be all for the right to self-defense. You can't get there, right? Especially in California, the response times are like average 30 minutes. But the right to self-defense should ensure all potential victims have the ability to protect themselves when and if the police officers can't get there in time. And the police officers should be empowering others to do that, or empowering people to exercise self defense. Clearly, these officers are unaware that this right was not bestowed on Americans by the grace of city officials, but by God. Okay, so it's not city officials that give you this right. You can't take away his CCL. Subsequently, it's not the responsibility of the citizens to prove that they deserve these rights. Okay? They don't have to prove, you don't have to prove that you deserve the right to self defense. That's endowed by a creator. Those rights are bestowed upon you by a creator, not by these city officials out of LA. Truly disgusting that the police officers that who took an oath to protect the Constitution would be holding someone's right to self defense hostage. And make no mistake, that's exactly what they're doing. They're holding his right to self defense hostage. That is out of LA this morning. An LA homeowner defending his family from these armed criminals. I've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm so excited because we've got so much to run through. So much. Four suspects. I want to get to these guys out of Las Vegas. I can't believe that this happened. But the video footage it's out there. It's real. There was this guy. He was beaten by a swarm of black teens, and they've caught about four suspects. Now they have eight suspects, but they've only got four in custody who beat this guy allegedly in Las Vegas. His name's Jonathan Lewis, and these four suspects they're possibly going to be charged as adults. So that's next on the buzz. Somebody texted in, they said, Dan Calkins versus Pritzker, the Supreme Court case. Yes. So I've actually heard that that's going all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, and it might actually show up on the docket here soon if it's not already. I told you guys about this guy. You have the right to self defense, and it's bestowed to you by a creator. And really, what these people are doing to Vince, who's this LA homeowner. He was a Los Angeles homeowner. He defended his family from these armed criminals. And this is a pattern, okay? So this wasn't like, one day these criminals came to his house. No, no, no. He's been dealing with crime in Governor Gavin Newsom's state for months now. So there was an instance where his home was broken into. That was number incident number 1. And then earlier in May his car was broken into. So his house was broken into in June. His car was broken into in May. And then prior to that, the night before, he actually had this shootout with criminals who were armed, by the way. The night before, he noticed that this group of criminals, they were driving around with no license plates and they were targeting homes in the area. So, of course, on November 4th, these two guys, they hopped his fence. They tried to force their way into his residence, and he turns around, he reaches for his gun, he has a CCL, and he started a shootout with these intruders. And the video footage shows, he's using the key to get inside of his house, and then these guys try to mug him and try to force their way inside of the residence. He just wasn't having it. He had a CCL, pulled the gun out on him, and now the LAPD took away his CCL. So they are holding his right to self-defense really hostage. That's what this is. They're holding his right to self-defense hostage, and it's truly disgusting that the police officers who took an oath to the Constitution are holding somebody's right to self-defense hostage. Okay, so on Friday, this is big news. I want to get to it. I'm going to dive into more of it here in the 7 o'clock hour. But these kids, I mean, these teenagers, and they should be charged as adults if they're going to beat somebody to death. This is a 17-year-old Jonathan Lewis at this high school in Las Vegas. And this happened on November 1st. And I told you guys the details about how Jonathan Lewis, this 17-year-old, I mean, it was all captured on tape. These people were filming it, and Jonathan Lewis lost his life. According to the Daily Mail, the judge has ordered 4 black teens to be held without bail at this Clark County detention center for their role in this incident where um, they killed somebody. So they're expected back into court tomorrow. So today's Monday. They're going to be back into court on Tuesday to figure out whether or not they're going to be charged as adults. So they've only got 4 right now. I think there's 8 suspects, but they've only got 4 suspects arrested, and they're all under the age of 16. Just think about that for a second. They're all under the age of 16. They managed to swarm Jonathan Lewis, kick him, beat him, and they have a hearing. So tomorrow is not the court date to figure out if they're going to be tried as adults. That's actually next month. I want to be clear about that. It's actually next month, but they are expected back into court tomorrow. I think that's, how do you plead to these charges against you? I don't know. But there's 4 of them, but there's 8 suspects. So they've got 4 out of the 8. I think that there were even more people who contributed to this. I definitely think that the people filming should be charged with some sort of like negligent homicide or something because they didn't go and they didn't try to help. And the whole reason, make no mistake, that the whole reason why they were filming is because they wanted clout. They wanted to get attention on the internet, and they wanted to film this beating of Jonathan Lewis because they think that it'd get clicks. And it did. I mean, the video went viral, and it was a brutal beating. It was circulating on the internet earlier this month, and it shows a group of black teens, probably about definitely more than 8. I would say 14 teens, if I had to guess. About 14 black teens swarming this white teen. His name's Jonathan Lewis, and he was in an alley right near his high school, and he was found unresponsive. Somebody actually picked him up and brought him back to the school. And then police arrived. Lewis was promptly taken to the hospital. in critical condition and was placed on life support. And then eventually he passed away and he succumbed to those injuries that he sustained from the beating. So authorities said that the fight started over a pair of wireless headphones. So get this, one of Lewis's little small friends, it was a smaller friend of his. He got into a fight over these headphones, and actually Lewis agreed to go fight. I don't think that he was uh, planning on taking on 10 people who swarmed him. I think that he was just trying to meet and fight over these wireless headphones with like maybe one, two boys. Um, so I'm going to read the father's statement here because it's important what the father says, Jonathan Lewis's father. And then I do want to get into this story. It's local. Michelle Blessent. I covered this story a little while back. He used to go by the name James Blessent, but he's indicted on three new charges. And I'll tell you about the Bloomington Police and how they referred to this man in their press release next. Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for joining me. I so do appreciate it. If you're watching, go ahead and smash the like button. We're going to talk about the Bloomington Police treating this man like a woman. His name is James Blessent. Well, he changed his name, and I noticed this. I was like, wait a second. So on the criminal search access, you have public access to anybody's name. You can type in somebody's name, find out if they've uh, gotten into trouble for either criminal cases or if they've actually, to court or traffic court. You can find out anything about anybody if they've at all gone through the court system. So I found out that this guy actually used to go by the name James. The nature of James's crimes here, allegedly, and I want to be clear, everybody's innocent until convicted, right? And, Bloomington Police, they made that clear in their press release, but they refer to this guy as a woman, throughout their press release, and they refer to, Michelle here as a woman in their press release. Now, Michelle Blessent, who used to go by the name James, he's been indicted on 3 new charges. Now, you're probably wondering, what did this guy do? Well, he was taken into custody at the McLean County Detention Facility since his arrest in April. Now, he was arrested in April of this year, and his original charges were involving this victim in this investigation with 5 counts of predatory criminal sexual assault of a victim under the age of 13. So his new charges are predatory criminal assault of a victim under 13, grooming and exploitation of a child less than 17. So he's just got new charges racked up. And I think that it has to deal with his original arrest in April. They're just charging him with more probably because they've got more solid, evidence after this investigation was conducted, okay, to charge him with all of this stuff. So, he remains in custody at the McLean County Detention Facility. Now, BPD in their press release, it's disturbing to me that they made sure to say this, and I hate when they say this, but it's true. I mean, I'm not, uh it just bothers me that we're giving this guy if we've got mountains of evidence. And it's just the way our justice system works, and I get that. But they said in their press release, all suspects are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. So I understand that he has to get a conviction first, but I do want to note that when I talked to Brant Parsley back in April about these original charges, law enforcement, and I asked law enforcement, Brant Parsley, "Hey, are you guys treating the arrest as a woman or a man?" And they said, "We're treating him as a woman." So he might actually be housed. From what I understand, he was being housed away from the women and kind of in his own, like his own cell, and he wasn't with the men or the women. But if they're treating him like a woman, and Brant Parsley said that, then I wouldn't put it past him if he's being housed with the woman. I wouldn't put it past our sheriff's department um or the jail there. I'd have to do some more digging to find out for sure. But when you got the Bloomington police saying that we're going to treat him like a woman, then that must mean that they are actually going to house him with the women. I mean, right? If you're treating him like a woman, then that means you're housing him with the women in the jail. Um, but I don't know. We'd have to double check on that. Either way, this is just ridiculous. He allegedly raped a kid. Okay, so when I asked about the extent of the crime, they explained that what he's charged with, this is an act of sexual penetration by force, where this in this situation the victim did not give consent. If you're watching right now, go ahead, smash the like button. We're going to get into Michelle Blessent, aka James Blessent. Um, and his story. Now he's been indicted on 3 more charges. And then we're also going to talk about Kid Rock. Now, he actually disclosed that he confronted the CEO of Anheuser-Busch over the Bud Light brouhaha for the first time. He's opened up about this to Sean Hannity. Kid Rock did. If you're watching, go ahead, smash that like button, smash the like button, and share this out with your friends. It's a Monday morning. We've got so much to get to today. But like I said, Kid Rock, he actually went up and he spoke with the CEO of Anheuser-Busch. They were at this UFC event and he was with the former president. And Kid Rock claims that he confronted the CEO of Anheuser-Busch at this recent UFC event with the former president. They actually both went up together to talk about this Bud Light brouhaha where the company hired Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney, from what I can understand, was paid like $185,000 to do this thing. So at first, I love it because Bud Light, they came out and they were like, well, it was just one can. It was just one can. Was it? Because $185,000 is different. And that's actually been proven where he was paid thousands of dollars for this gig. So it wasn't just one can. They clearly paid this guy to be a marketing kind of, I mean, $185,000, that's a lot to pay somebody, um, for one commercial, and, you don't pay somebody $185,000 for one commercial. Typically, if you're gonna pay somebody that much money, you're expecting them to continue to work for you. Um, but anyway, I'm gonna talk about Kid Rock. Also, raccoons are high in California. Yes. We're going to chat about this because this was actually on the Joe Rogan podcast and I found it kind of funny. So we're going to chat a little bit about how the raccoons are getting high in California now. And I'll tell you how in just a minute. Oh my, Kid Rock says that he actually confronted the CEO of Bud Light at this UFC event, and he actually confronted him over the Dylan Mulvaney debacle. So I'm excited to chat a little bit about Kid Rock. I also have this clip that I watched this morning. I'm not going to play it because it's on the Joe Rogan podcast, and they just cuss a storm up into it, and I'm just not going to play it here. But it's interesting what this comedian shares with Joe Rogan on his podcast how animal control told her that California's wild animals are on drugs. What? So the drug problem has gotten so bad in California that the animals, the wildlife there, they're getting high. And I'm going to tell you how all of that happens here on the Morning Buzz, Cities 92.9. This is a daily show from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. And it's not made possible unless listeners like you actually go subscribe to things like my YouTube channel. That's Camp Peterson 929. And if you don't frequent the advertisers that you hear on Cities 92.9, when you're not listening to me throughout the show, you should be listening to the commercials. And when you hear the commercials, you should be taking note of the businesses that advertise with us and you should go frequent their businesses. And if you have a business, reach out to me and reach out to the team. It's really easy. Just go to cities929.com. My email is there. If you have a business and you want to market that business, and if you want to get the word out about your business and get people who are like minded into your business and you get it, people, I mean, the city's listeners, we're awesome. We're loyal. We're good customers. And frankly, right, we're not liberals, and we'll support local businesses. And if you want somebody in your business like that, if you want a good customer to come into your business, you can reach out to us and you can advertise your business right here on Cities 92.9. Now that that's out of the way, I do want to talk about this story. I want to finish this one up in Las Vegas about this teenager who was really ambushed by 10 other black teens, and he's white. I think that this should be a hate crime. Uh, and like I said, I don't really like the idea of hate crimes. I don't think that they should exist. I don't think that murder needs a footnote. If you murder someone, then you should be, uh, then you should be convicted, and you should serve out and sentence to the max, right? The as much as the law affords it, we should punish you if you commit murder. Okay, and I don't think that murder needs a footnote. And I don't like the idea of hate crimes. But if anything was going to be a hate crime, I would imagine it'd be something like this, where you have multiple black teens, about 10 of them. Now they have 8 suspects, and they've only captured 4 of them. These black teens swarming this white teen Jonathan Lewis near his high school. They beat him. There was a video that circulated on the internet for about a month. I mean, it still pops up on my feed. It's sad. And this video is brutal. It's brutal. And he was in critical condition. He was promptly taken to the hospital after he was found unresponsive, lying in this alleyway next to his high school. He was on life support and then he passed away. So authorities, they said that all of this started over a pair of wireless headphones. Now, I've heard a few things. I guess Jonathan Lewis, the white kid, he was trying to stick up for his smaller friend, and they kept stealing one of Lewis's friends, the smaller friend's headphones, the wireless headphones. And Lewis said, "You know what? Let's fight this out. I'm going to meet you in the alley, and we're going to fight over it." Uh, little do I think, I don't think Jonathan was prepared to get into a fight with 10 other black teens who swarmed him. And Jonathan Lewis's father actually said in a statement that, he loves all of his kids. He didn't think that, he goes, it's just unimaginable that we could ever come to this point. And he said that they were cowards, the people who beat him, because, I mean, he was taking on probably about 2 or 3 of them pretty, he had it under control, about 2 or 3 of them, and once they realized, the other surrounding black teens, that he was going to beat these 3 kids up, by himself. It was like a 3-on-1 situation. Jonathan Lewis was, in that fight, and he was gonna win. Once they realized that, then these black teens swarmed him, and they killed him. And Jonathan Lewis's father, he says, I think that this is just a failure of all of humanity to recognize that we need to be teaching our youth how to coexist. So I think that the father even believes that this is some sort of hate crime, or at least uh, racially fueled. He says that we need to teach our youth how to coexist. And then Lewis's family, I thought that it's tragic, it's sad, but Lewis's family, they donated his organs after his autopsy was performed, and they set up a GoFundMe that was launched. So they've got the 4 suspects, like I said. They've got them in custody, but there's 4 other ones. I guess there's 8 suspects that they've got, but they don't have the other 4 in custody. On Friday, the 4 of the 8 teenagers who were charged as adults in the beating of the 17-year-old Jonathan Lewis, uh, they appeared in court on November 1st, it was. So, yeah, there's going to be another hearing, I guess, scheduled for next month to determine if they will also be tried as adults. The 4 arrested were all under 14 or 16. So yeah, this is just a tragic story. They're all being detained without bail. So, at the Clark County Detention Center, I do want to talk about Michelle Blessent, and then we're going to get into Kid Rock. And Kid Rock, actually, this is an interesting story. At this UFC event, he approached the Bud Light CEO over this Dylan Mulvaney debacle. And I want to talk about that here coming up in just about 5 minutes. But first, let's talk about this trans man. I think he's a trans man. I don't even know what you call it. He's a man pretending to be a woman. And he goes by the name Michelle. He used to go by the name James. How do I know that? I actually looked up Michelle Blessent. I looked up the last name Blessent, and he's been arrested under the name James, and he's been arrested under the name Michelle. This is the same person. He just is pretending to be Michelle, and this is a story out of Bloomington. Now, he recently was charged over the weekend, indicted on 3 new charges. These are brand new charges on top of what he's facing, in his April investigation, which we covered here at Cities 92.9. So, the Bloomington Police, people were upset because we referred to him as a woman. He's not a woman, he is a man, and he's pretending to be a woman. The Bloomington Police referred to him in a press release as a woman, and they referred to him as Michelle. And Blessent, he was taken into custody in April. Since he's been in custody since April, since his arrest, over these original charges involving the first victim in this investigation with 5 counts of predatory criminal sexual assault of a victim under 13. So this is sexual in nature, sexual assault, and he has a first victim, and now he's got more charges. So he's got new charges: predatory criminal sexual assault of a victim under 13. Um, and then he's got another charge. So these must be against a new victim because, according to press release, he was already charged with predatory criminal sexual assault of a victim under 13. Now, I don't know if they're charging him twice with that, but he was charged with 5 counts of that. So this might be a new victim. I've got to do some more digging, but either way, he's getting these new charges. He's got that charge, the predatory criminal sexual assault of a victim under 13, but he was already charged with 5 counts of that in the first in his original charges, um, involving the first victim in this investigation. So there might be more victims. Not too sure on that. I got to get clarification. But then there's another charge of exploitation of a child less than and grooming a child less than the age of 17. So he remains in custody at the McLean County Detention Facility. Like I said, I don't know if he is in the women's prison or the male's prison. Now, I've actually gone to the McLean County Jail and I've toured it. Is the difference between these two populations is unreal. I was touring the facility. I went over to the women's side where they house the women inmates, and it was very, let's say, peaceful. Okay. It was just very peaceful. You walked in, they were actually all listening to, I believe, a teacher of some kind or a counselor of some kind. They were all gathered around this table. Very, very beautiful facility. And the women seemed to actually be happy. I mean, as happy as one could be in custody at a McLean County jail. But they all seemed pretty in high spirits. The vibe was good. Then you go over to the men's prison. Now, I didn't go inside because I'm a woman. They wouldn't allow me, which I find kind of funny. If this woman, if this man is being housed with the women, I'd be curious because I wasn't allowed in the men's side of the prison. Now, I could see into the McLean County Jail on the men's side, and I'm just going to be honest with you, very much predominantly black population at the time I went to go visit the jail. And they were lifting weights, they were screaming, it was loud, they were spread out, it was just a totally different vibe, okay, and that's just because there's differences between men and women, okay, so I wasn't shocked to see that they were kinda loud, way louder, that's one thing I noticed right away was the noise, and they were doing pull-ups. They've got this really nice pull-up bar and, like, gym facility that's there that the men can go and work out. Uh, but I bring this up because at the time when we questioned Brant Parsley about this, from the Bloomington PD, we asked him, how is law enforcement treating this guy? Are they treating him like a woman or are they treating him like a man? And in April, on those original charges, Michelle Blessent, uh, the Brant Parsley said that their law enforcement, quote, is treating the arrest as a woman because that's how Michelle Blessent identifies. So I'd be concerned if Michelle Blessent is housed with the women. And here's why. Because I don't think that he's trans at all. I really don't. And the nature of this crime, uh, I don't think that he is an actual woman or actually transgender and I think he's literally pretending to be a woman. I don't think that he's got gender dysphoria or nothing like that. I really don't because and it's not just the movies. When you commit a crime against a child in a sexual way, even in prison, people don't look upon that very favorably. They don't like that. The inmates will beat you up. And I know this. I've talked to people. I've had people actually, family members who have been in prison, right? And they discuss how if they find out that you are a sexual predator and if you committed sex acts or sex crimes against a child, then you will not last long. Okay, so I would not be shocked to find out if he's just doing this because he wants to avoid being housed with the men in fear that he will be beat up. I don't know how common that is or what because I'm not a criminal. But I do know that people don't look very favorably upon criminals who are sexual predators and are committing sexual assault against a victim under the age of 13. Okay. And like I said, and like the press release says, all suspects are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. Allegedly, 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 he committed these crimes. I think it's deplorable and disgusting if they're letting Michelle, aka James, he used to go by the name James, if they're allowing this man to be housed with the women. I don't think that's right. Whatever he is biologically, if he has by the anatomy of a man, then he needs to be housed with the men. So like I said, in April, we asked about the extent of the crime. And I remember talking to Brant Parsley about it. He did not want to go into the details. And he goes, Kat, I don't think you want to know the details. I did. I wanted to know, you know, did he, what, is he a biological man? I really wanted to know, is he a biological man? Has he had the surgery? How serious is he about this whole transgender thing? Or is he just trying to avoid being housed with men so he won't get beat up? Now, sexual assault, as defined in Illinois, is penetration by force, or in a situation where the man or where the victim cannot give consent. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But look, if he allegedly raped a kid, I don't want to see us tread lightly. I really don't, and referred to him as a woman if he's not actually a woman. Okay, if he doesn't have the female anatomy, I don't think we should be treating him like a woman. Whatever his chromosome makeup is, that's the way we should treat him. Um, and I think that he might be trying to avoid a beatdown here in this men's prison, and that's why he's saying he's a woman. Okay, so I do have to take a break. We are going to talk a little bit about Kid Rock, and I promise we're going to lighten things up here because I've already talked about an LA homeowner this morning, how he defended his family from armed criminals, and how the LAPD actually revoked his gun permit, his CCL, and how they're holding hostage his right to self defense. Talked about that this morning. We also talked about those four suspects beating to death a Las Vegas teen, Jonathan Lewis. Now, there's other suspects out there that they haven't brought into custody. And I think that there's even more people who aren't suspects who haven't been investigated. They're saying that there's only 8 suspects. When you watch the video, it looks like there's about 10 to 12. So I wouldn't doubt that there's 2 people that they're just totally not on the list of bringing them down. But I talked about how these 4 suspects, they could be charged as adults. Uh, and then we also talked about Michelle Blessent here. He used to go by the name James. He's been indicted on 3 new charges. I do have to take a break. You're listening to Cities 92.9, the news and talk of Bloomington Normal. I'll be right back. Find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. Subscribe to my channel. That's Kat Peterson 99. Good morning, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. Ryan McKenzie this morning, political correctness from our very own local PD. Imagine that. Yeah, it was kind of disappointing when I did the story in April to hear the Bloomington Police Department take a position on it where they said, hey, we're going to be treating this arrest like he's a woman because he identifies that way. Tragic, very tragic, and I get that people are innocent until proven guilty. I'm not trying to allegedly, we'll have to see how it plays out in the courts if he actually did these things. But if he actually did these things, right, it's not going to age well. Okay, so if he actually did these things and the Bloomington Police Department said, yeah, we're going to be treating this guy like a woman, why would we cater to somebody that commits such a heinous crime? And it's very clear. Okay, so eh, he's been charged with things before. James Blessent. Actually, when you read through his, I'm actually going to look that up. When you read through his rap sheet, and you have public access to this McLean County public access system, if you look up, Blessent, um, he used the name James. Multiple times and then was arrested at one point with that name, James. So I don't think that this is authentic. I don't think that he authentically believes that he is a woman. I don't think that this is a case of gender dysphoria. I think that this is actually a case where a man does not want to face the consequences of his actions in a men's prison. When you commit heinous acts like this against children, it's not looked at too favorably in the in the prison, okay, in the men's prison. The men, the criminals, they actually have standards where they will actually beat you up if you commit a heinous act against a child in a sexual way. That's actually not looked at too favorably, even by criminals in our justice system. And he might actually be trying to avoid getting punched in the face by these people or beaten by these people. I don't know how common that is, but like I said, I don't truly believe that this is authentic. Good morning. It's a Monday morning and Thanksgiving dinner stress. Nothing evokes warm feelings of the holidays like a large family meal. But for the ones hosting the meals, those warm feelings are often replaced by a lot of stress. So my mom, she always stresses, tries to get it. If we ever host Thanksgiving at our place, she's always stressing out and she's trying to get the dinner together. But a poll recently came out and said 32% of hosts say making sure everyone is having a good time is what causes them the most stress. They want to make sure everybody's having a good time. 30% of people in this poll said that they stress over what food to serve. Uh, that's me too. I mean, I kind of like have done this enough where I used to make Thanksgiving meals with my parents all of the time. I mean, every year, and I still do it, right? But I've gotten so good at knowing what we do every Thanksgiving. I mean, it's canned yams. It's or it's candied yams. It's like the marshmallows, the brown sugar, that yam casserole, the sweet potato casserole. There's green bean casserole. I know how to make that by memory. Right. There's also something we like to do is these quiches. They're like vegetable pies, and I pretty much know the recipe when it comes to that. So I don't really stress over what to serve because it's the same thing every year. Despite that stress, 59% of people say they actually enjoy hosting dinner. Yeah, some stress is good stress. I think stressing out about, dinner, what to make, that's good stress. And then 55% say that it's important for their guest to have a favorable opinion of their holiday meal. I think there's also a little bit of competition that goes on, right, in our families where, if we're hosting Thanksgiving this year, it's got to be good. It's got to be good. So that way they say, "Oh, remember Thanksgiving last year? This dish was my favorite." So yeah, I mean, Thanksgiving tradition, dinner, I think that evokes a lot of warm feelings, and I'm excited for it. Thanksgiving is this week. No thanks. Going around the table saying what you're thankful for is a Thanksgiving tradition in many families. But a lot of people don't want to do that, actually. So, a survey actually said 60% of respondents would rather do anything other than think about what they're grateful for on Thanksgiving. Yikes, that's not good. So, a survey actually found that 60% of respondents in the survey actually did not want to go around the table and say what they're thankful for. So, uh, my pastor, Pastor Tim, from the tabernacle, he actually got our family in on this little it's a called a blessings bowl, and it's something that we just do year round. So, um, any kind of blessings that we receive as a family, we'll write it down on a piece of paper, and it's a clear bowl, and it just sits out all year round. And we typically read them around Christmas time. We don't read them at Thanksgiving. We do some prayer and things like that at Thanksgiving, but the blessing bowl is just a year-round thing, and we just put in so many different things that we think or that God has blessed our family well, not think, but God has blessed our family with. So we'll put all of those things in the blessing bowl, and we'll read it at the end of the year around Christmas time, around the holidays, just because we're all together. So yeah, I actually really enjoy the blessing bowl. Maybe that's easier and it's not so like on the spot, if you're going around the table and you got to think of what you're thankful for. You're grateful for, I mean, being just alive, having breath in my lungs. I'm just so grateful for that this morning. Very grateful that our operations manager, Chris Murphy, who does the sports here at Cities 92.9, you can hear him on the sports here in just about 5 minutes. Grateful that he came out, saved my butt off of the side of the highway because I ran out of gas. That's never happened to me in all of my life. But it happened this morning. I ran out of gas, had to plug in a couple of segments right before I got here this morning, but ran out of gas on the side of the highway. But I am so grateful that I have friends and operations manager here at Great Plains Media come save me. That not a lot of people can say that they've got great friends like that, and that I mean I'm here today. It could have turned out very poorly, but hey, God's on my side and God's on your side. And he continues to just bless me, bless you. Just look for the blessings. Count your blessing. If I keep counting my blessings, I'm not going to have enough. I don't have enough toes or fingers to count my blessings. I'm telling you. All right, on the other side, things that we've got to chat about. One thing that I do want to hit in the 7 o'clock hour, we've got Kid Rock. He opened up really about his involvement with Dylan Mulvaney. Now, you guys remember him shooting a case of Bud Light and exploding. So he actually opened up to Sean Hannity about the Dylan Mulvaney brouhaha for the first time, and he shared something kind of surprising. He actually confronted the CEO of Anheuser-Busch over the Dylan Mulvaney debacle. So we're going to hit that next on the Morning Buzz. Good morning, friends. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're watching, go ahead and smash the like button. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I've made it easy. Just go ahead and smash the subscribe button. It's my face at the bottom right hand corner, maybe. Smash that like button. And we are going to be talking a little bit about Kid Rock and how he approached the CEO of Anheuser-Busch. And then I do also want to chat a little bit about California. They've got a problem with their raccoons getting high. Yes, you heard me correctly. This comedian, she actually shares this wild story on the Joe Rogan podcast about how animal control told her that California's wild animals are now on drugs because the fentanyl problem is so bad. That's next. A comedian sharing this wild story on the Joe Rogan podcast. I found it, I thought it was crazy. I've got to share it with you. The animal control there actually told this comedian about how the wild animals in California, like raccoons, coyotes, things of that nature, they are high on drugs because the fentanyl problem is getting way out of hand. So, we're going to be talking a little bit about that. How do the wild animals get high in California? Well, I've got that answer for you coming up in just about 5 minutes. But first, do want to talk about Kid Rock. Now, he has finally opened up about his involvement in the Dylan Mulvaney brouhaha for the first time, this debacle. And he actually shared a very surprising note with Sean Hannity. When he was on with Sean Hannity, he says that he actually confronted the CEO of Anheuser-Busch over this Dylan Mulvaney debacle where they hired this trans performer, Dylan Mulvaney, and I think it's come out now that he was actually paid close to $185,000 to do this marketing campaign for Bud Light, where he's got this his face on this can, and I thought it was funny at the time. Bud Light said that, "Oh, it's just one can. It was a gift. We didn't want him to be like an employee or anything. He wasn't marketing for Bud Light. It was just a gift to him." No, 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 no. You don't pay somebody $185,000 to not market a product. So, anyway, so Kid Rock, he was kind of considered that first person who started this boycott, and the boycott is alive and well. Don't believe me? Just go to Walmart and look at the prices of Bud Light and how they've just plummeted. There's also even a rebate thing. So I was actually in the store the other day, and they had this sign, and it said, "Hey, if you buy this Bud Light, then we'll give you your money back. We'll give you your money back, and just fill out this rebate thing and mail it in." So yeah, it was wild. It's wild that this boycott has gone on for as long as it has, and I don't think that it's going to let up anytime soon. But anyway, Kid Rock, he was one of the first people who people assumed that he started this boycott because he shot up with a gun cases of the beer after the company started working with this controversial trans performer, Dylan Mulvaney. Now, he actually never called for a boycott, which I thought was funny. Kid Rock never called for a boycott. He just shot up the beer in this video and he said, "Screw you, Bud Light." And but people assumed that he was calling for a boycott, I guess. And CNN, they actually went undercover to Kid Rock's, Nashville restaurant, and they caught him drinking the beer, caught him drinking the Bud Light, and they were like, "Oh, how could he be drinking He's not even following his own boycott that he called for." But plot twist, Kid Rock never even really called for the boycott, and he's right about that. So as the rocker told Hannity, there's a reason he never called for a boycott. Boycotting the beer has had a lot of adverse effects where, the company's middle class workers, people who bottle the beer, people who uh, uh, can the beer and package it, people who distribute the beer, they have been out of work. A lot of them are out of work, a lot of them laid off. The boycotting would not affect the people responsible, the people who are at the top. Okay, so Kid Rock, he claims that he confronted the CEO of Anheuser-Busch when he was at this recent UFC fight. He was seen with our event. It was the former president Donald Trump was there. We had Kid Rock there. We had Dana White there. So Bud Light made news when it worked out a deal with the UFC. I think it's like millions of dollars. They've made a deal with the UFC to where the UFC is going to market the beer. And this is and it would make the fighting league, make it the fighting league's biggest sponsor ever. Okay, they worked out a deal with the UFC. This is the biggest sponsor that the UFC will ever have. I mean, to the tune of $100 million. Okay, that's how much Bud Light has paid the UFC to make them a sponsor. They're really trying to uh they're trying to make up for what they've done. Bud Light. So I'm gonna play for you what Sean Hannity and Kid Rock talked about on Sean Hannity's show. It's interesting. Um and it's interesting that a lot of people thought that Kid Rock had actually called for a boycott when he didn't. Like I said, I don't think that we should let up. And I'll get to that here in a second, but here's Kid
I
Rock.
saw you with President Trump and Dana and Tucker, and you guys all went to the MMA. What was it? The Garden.
UFC,
right?
yeah.
The UFC.
Garden.
All right. So he was on this show,
I saw.
and it was about Bud Light.
Here we go.
he took on as a sponsor. Now, I'll tell you why I've never in my whole life ever supported a boycott. I've never called for a firing or a cancellation ever. I mean, even people that I can't stand, like Bill.
By the way, I didn't either.
Yeah. Okay. So what I worried about in that case was the guys that have the beer
working
routes.
class people.
Right. The guys that work in the factory, the guys that load the
Yeah.
trucks, they're not the guys that made that stupid,
They had no dog in this fight at all. It's
Right.
actually funny. Speaking of that UFC fight, I'm standing there with our favorite president,
Right.
and someone comes over to like the CEO of Anheuser-Busch standing right behind you.
Right.
So I go to the POTUS. I'm like, hey, that's the CEO of Anheuser-Busch. Trump's like, you want to go talk to him? I'm like, I do. So me and him go over. We actually had a great conversation.
Really?
Because, if you put this in context, why did this start? It's like, I told him that night, I go, you signaled to a lot of people like myself, like-minded people. Put the trans thing aside for a minute, right? I was like, but by sending that can to the trans kid, you kind of signaled to us you support this lifestyle, and more importantly, like men being in women's sports or in my granddaughter's locker room. Most of us draw a hard line right there. No. What are you
have
doing?
A granddaughter? You're like
Got
40,
two grandkids.
You're like 42 years old. Well, go ahead.
It gets cold in Detroit, Sean.
Yeah, I guess it does.
So I said, you signaled that to us. I said, but speaking of, I was like, if someone wants to be trans, I was like, I didn't rip that kid. I said, F you guys. I said, I didn't even say boycott or cancel. I said, F you. I said, what are you doing? Injecting yourself into this conversation, these polarizing social issues. I was like, you could be doing so much more positive stuff, just making us laugh and drink beer. But I said, someone wants to dress up like a girl, they want to be transgender, whatever. A lot of people fought and died for them to do that. Go for it. We can coexist. In public places. You might not be my first dinner invite, you know what I mean? And I'm probably not yours. And if you're gay, no one cares anymore, right? We all got gay family members, gay friends, gay coworkers. It's like, cut it out. Just be gay. I'm not going to clap louder for you.
You know what I hear you saying? You believe in freedom.
Yeah.
But if you want to
So there you have it, folks. I mean, he actually approached the CEO, and I've maintained this same stance the entire time. Okay. All of these companies are owned by global corporations, and they're run by people who look down on you. If you like beer, almost everywhere you live here in America, I know right here in Bloomington, there are local brewers. If you want a list, I can get you some local brewers. But you can find a few local breweries where A, the beer is better, B, your money is staying in your community, and C, even if you and brewer vote for different people, they don't hate you over it, likely. Okay. I'm not speaking to all the local brewers. Maybe they will hate you if you voted for Donald Trump, but it's more likely than not that they won't hate you just because you voted for Donald Trump, your local brewer. So yeah, I've maintained the same stance on this. Global corporations, they hate you. They're run by people who look down on you. And that's what happened here with this Dylan Mulvaney thing, where they paid the guy $185,000 to market Bud Light. That's insane. That's not just one can either, folks. Okay, Bud Light, you're wrong. It wasn't just one can. There's evidence now, receipts of what they paid. They paid an installment of near $185,000 to Dylan Mulvaney to market this thing. So yeah, Kid Rock going up to the CEO and having a conversation about, what, why hire the kid? Why hire the trans performer Dylan Mulvaney? You just didn't have to butt your nose into these poor polarizing social issues. All right, I'm going to be back next. This is Cities 92.9. Good morning, folks. If you're watching, go ahead and smash the like button. Yes, we're going to be back. Uh, my choice is Guinness, best beer ever. Yeah, I'm kind of a stout person myself. I do like what is that? I think it's Evil Horse Milk Stout. Evil Horse, I believe. I don't know where that comes from. I thought it was an Illinois brewer, but let me look that up actually. Evil Horse. Yep, it is. It's a brewing company right here in Illinois. I really like them. Most likely, these guys are, um, you know, not going to uh, hate me because I vote a different way. Like I said, I've had the same stance. Global corporations, they don't care about you. Just get your beer from a local guy. And maybe that local guy's a liberal. That's fine. Obviously, I would prefer that you get some sort of like, you support a business that has conservative values, right? And I definitely believe in the parallel economy. Public Square is a great resource for that. I frequent the Public Square website, and I find businesses that have like mine. I believe in the parallel economy. Um, but yeah, Guinness, Evil Horse Milk Stout is actually one of my favorites, and it's a brewery out of Illinois. Actually, there was this beer, and I forget what it's called. I think it's called Freedom Beer, and it was out of Illinois. Um, gosh, I forget what this guy's name or what that beer was in Illinois. Illinois brewery, conservative. Um, conservative dad says he's brewing a woke free beer. That's right. It's called Ultra Right. That's what it's called. That's actually out of Illinois. Um, that company. So he started here in Illinois. I think it's brewed here in Illinois, actually. So yeah. Um, Ultra Right is the beer. Far right dad. I love how the CBS and Pink News. Um, yeah, they launched this beer. It was a beer company, and it's called Ultra Right. Yep, Illinois-based Bent River Brewing Company. So, yeah, there is a brewing company right here in Illinois, and it's the Ultra Right beer. There are other beer companies that you can go frequent. Ultra Right is an Illinois brewery. Um, Evil Horse is an Illinois brewery. It tastes better. It's I mean, there's so many different reasons, and they're not global corporations that hate you. Coming up, we are going to be talking about liberals in California. Now they have made it um, a misdemeanor if you have possession of cocaine. So they are very lax on drug crimes. And I've got to tell you about how the raccoons there in the wildlife are actually um, they are dying of fentanyl overdoses. So I'm going to tell you how in just a couple of minutes. Thursday. It is the morning buzz, city's 92.9, 7:56 a.m. It's a little chilly out there. I was kind of cold. It was like 45 degrees this morning, and I don't know. I was a little cold out there this morning. So grab a jacket if you're on your way out to work. Grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, sit down. Let's have a conversation about what's going on in California. So, for quite some time, liberals have been saying that, the prohibitions against drugs have triggered a crime wave. The prohibitions on alcohol, like the prohibition on alcohol, legal penalties against drugs must end. So they're liberals, what they believe, they want all legal penalties for drug possession and selling drugs. They want to decriminalize it. They want to decriminalize drugs, all of them. Some even go as far as to claim that criminal penalties are not a deterrent when it comes to drug use. So liberals believe that, because we've outlawed things like cocaine, fentanyl, heroin, they say that that's the reason why there's, a there why there's just this crime wave and why people use those and abuse them. Okay. Liberals are dumb. Liberals in California, they've actually decided to make simple possession of cocaine a misdemeanor offense. They're wild. Things have gotten so bad in California that even the animals are getting hooked on drugs. And I've got to tell you how, because this comedian, she actually shared on the Joe Rogan podcast how animal control informed her that the California wild animals are actually all high. They're getting into drugs because the problem is so bad there. I'll tell you how coming up in just a little bit. Good morning, folks. If you're watching, go ahead and smash that like button. We're going to be talking with Jerry Vogler in just a couple of minutes for McLean County Veterans Corner. We love to do that here at Cities. The Veterans Corner, we will be talking a little bit about how liberals, they are totally against criminalizing drugs, and that's a problem. And we have an example. We have an example in California where if you are lax on drug possession, if you decriminalize a lot of these possessions of cocaine, heroin, if you make them misdemeanor offenses, then you start to run into some other problems like your raccoons being high. Yes, things have gotten so bad where the animals, wildlife in California, they are now getting hooked on drugs, the wildlife. So the wildlife in California, especially raccoons and coyotes, they've been tripping on fentanyl. And this comedian Whitney Cummings actually told Joe Rogan about this on a podcast interview that the two had on November 10th. And I thought this was really interesting, and I had to bring this to you guys. So she said that she actually found a raccoon in her backyard, and this raccoon was acting weird. We're going to get into this story for the stream and for our radio friends. If you're watching, smash that like button. We're back in just 2 minutes. Mhm. Woohoo! Hey, this is the Morning Buzz City's 92.9, and the raccoons, they're getting high in California. And I've been telling you guys about this all morning, and I want to hit this story right before we get into Veterans Corner with Jerry Vogler from the McLean County VA. He's the superintendent, and every Monday morning, we do a little something called the Veterans Corner, and we catch you up on news in the veterans community here locally and nationally. So we're going to get to that here in just a couple of minutes. But first, liberals. They have been saying for quite some time that they are against the prohibitions against drugs, and that they think that criminalizing drugs is a problem. They think that legal penalties against drugs, that stuff has got to go. Some liberals, they even go as far as to claim that criminal penalties against those who either possess or deal drugs, that they're actually not a deterrent when it comes to drug use, that penalties are not a deterrent, which is just false. That's data. I mean, statistics that shows that having these criminal penalties in place actually serves as a great deterrent. Just look at El Salvador. I mean, he cracked down on these gangs, the president there, and he's cracking down on it. And I mean, he cut the homicide rate in half. He's cracking down on the drug possession. He's cracking down on drug dealing. Anyway, so liberals in California, they've decided to make possession of cocaine actually a misdemeanor offense. So we have an example of how things pan out when you get rid of this criminalizing drugs. When you decriminalize drugs, we have an example, and it's California, of how bad things can actually get. So doped out raccoons appear to be the new reality, and residents say that they're having to deal with that in California, which is California. The wildlife in California, especially raccoons and coyotes now, they're tripping on fentanyl, and that's according to this comedian Whitney Cummings, and she actually talked to Joe Rogan seriously about this on his podcast, and she found a raccoon in her backyard. And I'm not going to play the bit from the podcast because it's just riddled with F bombs. So I can't really play it here on air. But she talks about how she found a raccoon in her backyard and how this raccoon was actually acting really, really weird. And she goes up and she sees him in the tree, and they typically sleep in trees, and they're like draped over the branch, and they'll hang their feet when they're sleeping, but they usually move, especially if you get too close or if you poke the little guy with a stick, which is what Whitney Cummings did in her backyard. She actually grabbed a stick and poked the the raccoon who was passed out over the branch in this tree. And she says this on the podcast. She goes, I'm like, I have this raccoon in my tree. She calls animal control. And they said, the response from the animal control is priceless. It's beautiful. They go, "Yeah, that's where they live." The most California response you could possibly think of. Okay, they go, "Yeah, that's where they live." I could imagine some like valley girl answering the phone. "Yeah, that's like where they live." And she goes, "Yes, I'm concerned about it because I think that it's got rabies because it's not moving and it seems sick." And the animal control staffer actually was like, you know, she was saying, "Oh, well, that's where they live," and she didn't think that it was an actual problem, but she didn't want Cummings, the woman with the raccoon problem, she didn't actually want the raccoon freaking out or having a rabies problem. She didn't want a coyote to eat the raccoon and then, escalate the problem where she's got a rabid coyote running around. And, so the animal control staffer actually says, to this woman on the phone that they have a problem where the raccoons are actually drinking the water. They're drinking city water and they are drinking, like people are flushing the fentanyl because the cops come in and they'll flush the fentanyl down the toilets. So the fentanyl is getting into the water supply in California. And these little critters like raccoons and coyotes drink out of the water supply and they're getting high. So this is what the animal control staffer was telling this woman over the phone that, yeah, people are flushing their drugs down the toilet because they don't want the cops to see, or they and they'll start flushing their fentanyl in the water. Wow. I guess the cartels did not tell the coyotes that it's an awful business move when you get hooked on your own supply. Like everybody knows that. Okay. But no, these coyotes, they're getting high and they're getting hooked on drugs. And this has led to an increase of aggressive attacks not only by raccoons but also coyotes over the summer. You're starting to see this where raccoons are taking over. And so this is just this is wild. Drug abuse has gotten so bad, it's wreaking havoc on the wildlife there. And at the very least, this proves that the left should not be taken seriously when they cry and they cry and cry and cry. And they're like, well, you need to legalize drugs. You need to legalize drugs. Are you kidding me right now? Like, this is what's going on. I can't take liberals seriously when they say, yeah, we should legalize drugs. No. um, but I do have to shift gears. Let's talk with Jerry Vogler for the Veterans Corner. Good morning, Jerry. How are you this morning? On Monday?
I'm just great, Kat. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So let's get into it. Veterans living with diabetes know that self-management is essential to reducing the risk for hospitalizations and complications from heart disease, kidney disease, stroke, amputations, blindness. So, over 30 million Americans have type 2 diabetes when the body cannot effectively, this is lower the blood sugar levels. So, nearly 25% of veterans who receive care from the VA have diabetes. So, tell me a little bit about diabetes and telehealth, this new innovation coming out for the veteran community.
Prior to this change that the VA has just implemented, the diabetic veteran would be required to take tests and call them in to their VA doctor and so forth, or they would have to make appointments pretty often to establish the relationship, and then also for the actual decision by the doctor as to what type of going forward treatment should be done for that veteran. And that changes depending on the results and the diet and what the blood sugar level tests and so forth show when they do come in. With telehealth and some other things they're doing, it reduces the frequency of the visits, which is always good, as long as you get a good substitute for that. And then there's a program called the Advanced Comprehensive Diabetes Care, ACDC, which is kind of an interesting name, and provides critical access to diabetes staff. Like I said, reduces the frequency in both the VA clinics, like the one here in Bloomington, and also the medical centers like at Danville, Illinois. And that, of course, frees up doctors to take care of other patients who actually need to have a face-to-face. And it uses home telehealth services and supports veterans with hard to control diabetes with three key components, and that is telemonitoring, self-management support, which if they're having any kind of issues at all, and they don't need to see the doctor, but they need to see a staff person about something that's not working for them, and also a specialist guided medication management, which may be a variety of different things depending on the situation, to help that veteran have the best outcome in the treatment of their diabetes. So it's a little different approach, less concentrated on periodic visits. To if the veteran has a need, they can go immediately with telehealth or the direct line into the ACDC program for immediate help rather than waiting for appointment.
Huh, that's interesting. And one thing that I also wanted to talk about was more VA healthcare and how it's improving the benefits for specifically World War II vets. So all World War II veterans are now eligible for no-cost healthcare, medical services, and nursing home care from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So this was announced actually on Veterans Day of this year. Tell me a little bit more about this program.
This has in my opinion, kind of a sad reflection on treatment of veterans, and also a feel good. Maybe this is going to be very positive. However, there's only 120,000 approximately World War II veterans still alive, which means all the way from World War II up to the present time, if for whatever reason they didn't qualify for VA health care, like after 2003 when they put a means test for income on there, the existing veterans will be able to get immediate health care at no cost. And that means, glasses, hearing aids, all those things that as we get older we need. And the interesting thing that they're trying to do, because the VA, if they're not already hooked up with VA health care, it's very hard to reach them. So what they're doing is they're actually doing an outreach program at the VA by phone and by mail to encourage World War II veterans who are not currently enrolled VA healthcare to apply immediately. And with a World War II background, they will immediately be approved. This is the difference between applying for VA healthcare and enrolling. World War II veterans will now be enrolled rather than have to apply. So it's a real good thing. But if we can't get the word out to the World War II veterans, it's not worth a darn. And it's a shame that all classifications of veterans have to go through this waiting period because of an artificial means test on income. Vietnam veterans are especially hit with that. So hopefully with this change for the VA healthcare being available to the World War II veterans, that eventually it will get up to the Korean War automatic and the Vietnam veterans.
Yeah.
Because only about 30% of the Vietnam veterans are actually enrolled in VA healthcare.
Interesting. Well, and where do we go to enroll if you're a World War II vet? Where can you apply for the VA healthcare?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. You can dial a toll-free number, 800-698-2411, or you can simply call up the medical center in Danville or the clinic at 207 Hamilton Road in Bloomington. And that's 309-827-4090, and ask for eligibility. And they'll walk you through the process. I'll probably have you come out and provide a DD-214 proof of service, and then they can go right into the system.
Awesome. Well, and we've got a question that I've got to get you to answer here, Jerry. Why are bagpipes played at military funerals? This was a question that came into you for the Veterans Corner.
In doing a little bit of research about bagpipes in America, I became aware that the bagpipe really wasn't here until the Great Potato Famine in, of all places, Ireland, not Scotland. And of course, the Irish were not initially welcomed at all in the United States, and finding any kind of work was very difficult. Back home in Ireland, it was tradition that firemen and police officers who passed away had bagpipes played at their funerals. Of course, the Irish, having to take these dangerous jobs like policemen and firemen in the United States in order to be employed, they carried that tradition forward to America. And eventually, through the years, the great Highland bagpipers, not the Irish pipes, became kind of the standard accepted at all funerals, especially for military police and firefighters. And I've had maybe 2 funerals in my life that were not for veterans that had actually had bagpipes. They're not thought of something that you sit around and put on the stereo and listen to while you're reading a good book.
Mm.
It gets your attention, and the big reason why they play them at funerals is that the bagpipe, it's special. It has a kind of a mournful sound, and it seems to touch most the intricate part of the emotions in a powerful manner, which is very, very relevant for funerals. And it's kind of as if the bagpipes can express the deep mourning of the soul, a type of mourning that cannot be expressed merely with human words.
Mm. Well, I know that the bagpipes, they always move me in a way that you wouldn't really think, because the bagpipes, they're not a popular instrument, but when they're played, I mean, it just moves you in a way that it, you know it's a type of mourning that can't be expressed merely with human words, like you said. It expresses a deep mourning of the soul, and I love the bagpipes. I do. So we're going to have to take a break, but Jerry Vogler, thanks so much for joining me here on the Morning Buzz for Veterans Corner, and thanks for all you do.
Okay, well, and thanks for all you and Great Plains Media does for veterans, and have a great day.
You too. All right, folks, we're going to be back here in just a little bit. 8 o'clock hour, some things that I've got to cover. I actually do need to clarify something with the raccoon story. I'm going to come back to that, where this comedian was on with Joe Rogan, and she talks about how the raccoons, the coyotes, they're all high in California. That's next on the Morning Buzz. morning. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in, folks. We are going to be back in just a little bit. We're going to be chatting a little bit about Argentina. They just recently elected a conservative leader, which is interesting. We are going to be also chatting about the Michelle Blessent case right here in Bloomington. Now, the Bloomington Police Department, they refer to this guy as a woman. And at the time when we asked Brant Parsley in April what law enforcement was going to treat this guy like, they said that they were going to treat the arrest as a woman because that's how Blessent identifies. Michelle Blessent identifies. He used to go by by the name James, but he's a trans guy. He's a man pretending to be a woman, and he used to go by the name James. And now he's been indicted on 3 new charges. If you're watching, go ahead and share this out with your friends and like the show, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's Cat Peterson 929. We're back right now. So I have to make sure that I do this story justice and I just don't gloss over this part of the story. It's very important. So, like I said, this woman, she's a comedian and she was on the Joe Rogan podcast and she was talking about how she came into contact with a weird raccoon. She found a raccoon that was acting really weird in her yard. And she noted how these animals typically, sleep in high up spots and they also like pass out over the branches. So they'll put their like paws on each side of the branch and, they'll just sleep up there in the tree. And she was like, but this raccoon was really acting weird. So I went out there and typically when you get close, they'll move. But this little guy wasn't moving. She took a stick and she like poked at the raccoon and the raccoon wouldn't move. And she calls up animal control and this is in California. So she calls up the California Animal Control to her county and she says, you know, this this raccoon is not responding when I poke it with a stick and it's acting really weird. I'm worried that it's got rabies. I'm worried that a coyote is going to eat it and the problem is only going to escalate where I've got a rabid raccoon running around or a rabid coyote running around or multiple rabid coyotes or raccoons running around. So wildlife in California, especially raccoons and coyotes, they're tripping on fentanyl and here's why. Now she goes into detail on the Joe Rogan podcast how the phone call went and how the animal control staffer actually disclosed to her that the reason why the raccoons and the coyotes are getting into the fentanyl is because people flush it down the toilet. Now, the story gets even deeper. Earlier, I had said that they probably are flushing it to avoid prison time, but that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you don't really get a whole lot of prison time when it comes to drugs in California. It's all decriminalize cocaine. If you have possession of cocaine, it's like a misdemeanor. Fentanyl is kind of is actually illegal, but I'm pretty sure that you can get off pretty easy in California. I think it is still a felony charge, but liberals there in California and California, they tried to push to decriminalize all drugs. If it was up to a liberal, they'd be like, yeah, let's all do fentanyl. Let's all do heroin and cocaine, right? And then they'll try to even say that these criminal penalties are not a deterrent when it comes to drug use, which is just wrong when you look at everything statistically. But liberals have been saying for quite some time that they're against the prohibitions on drugs and that this actually leads to a crime wave, which is just not true. And they compare it to alcohol. They say that, oh, there's abuse when it comes to heroin and fentanyl because it's not legalized. We need to legalize it. So yeah, let me get back to the story here where the animals, why are they getting into the fentanyl? It's because people are flushing it and it's getting into the water supply. But here's why people are flushing it. So the California animal control staffer says that a lot of wild animals in California are acting really weird right now because people are testing their cocaine for fentanyl. And if it tests positive, they flush it down the toilet. So there's fentanyl in the water. So people who use cocaine habitually and, are users of cocaine, they don't want the fentanyl and they'll test it. And if it is cut with fentanyl, they'll flush it. So that's how the fentanyl is getting into the water supply. So, yeah, I guess the cartels didn't tell the coyotes that it's awful business move to get hooked on your own supply. But yes, so this is this is wild, where you've got people using cocaine and they wanna test it to make sure that it doesn't have fentanyl in it, and when they test it and find out there's fentanyl in it, they flush it, and now the raccoons and coyotes are getting high. The animals, the wildlife, so they're hooked on drugs, and been a sudden increase, and you can look this up, of raccoon attacks in Portland over the summer. There was increase of coyote attacks. The Oregon Catalyst suggested that the abundance of raccoons and illicit drugs in Portland may well have caused this reality. So there's an abundance of coyotes and raccoons and drugs. So this is how the story happened. I just want to make sure that we understand that it's not really they're flushing the drugs because they don't want the cops to see. They're flushing the drugs because they don't want to get high on fentanyl and die. That's why, because the cocaine users, it's cut with fentanyl and I mean, they don't wanna die on fentanyl overdoses and use it as cocaine, and then they die on fentanyl overdoses. So what they're doing, they're testing it, and then they're flushing it if it actually does in fact have cocaine in it. I'm live, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Rumble. You can smash the like button if you're watching and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I wanna talk about the Los Angeles homeowner. He defends his family from these armed criminals, but get this, the LAPD is now revoking his gun permit, his CCL. I thought that they'd give him the keys to the city. I mean, and I mean, he was forced to defend himself and his family in his LA home, and you would think that they'd thank him for his valiant effort, but what does the LAPD do instead? They actually took away his permit because he yelled at some cops. Yelled at some cops. They're saying that it's not because he used the gun, it's more so because he yelled at the cops. So we're going to get into that story, how it all played out here on the Buzz, Cities 92.9. Text me at 309-451-9299. Yeah, where's PETA? Are they like upset because um California is a cesspool and now they're killing wildlife. Way to go, liberals. Yeah, these poor little raccoons are high on fentanyl and it's because of liberal policies. And you would think that the liberals would be, all for or all against um the fentanyl, right? And it being in the water supply. But they're not outraged by this. Only you and I are outraged by this. I think that that's terrible. Poor little raccoon, high as hell, up there in the tree. It's so bad it is in California, California, when it comes to the drug problem. But like I said, we're going to be talking about Los Angeles. The Constitution proves that we have an inalienable right to self defense. Okay. You read the Constitution, it says, shall not be infringed. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Bear arms is self defense. It's not necessarily, guns. It's just how you choose to defend yourself. Okay. And that can be guns, that can be a baseball bat, whatever you choose. But you have to figure out what you're going to be able to do or how you're going to be able to defend yourself. Me, I choose gun, right? Because I'm sorry, look at these little noodles. I can't protect myself effectively without a weapon. Okay. And I should be able to choose what kind of weapon I want to use to defend myself effectively. Now, despite all of this, the Constitution saying shall not be infringed, it's becoming increasingly clear that in many progressive run cities, including the town of Normal, they don't want you to have that right and protect that right. And they don't want you to protect yourself from criminals who could cause you harm, great harm. So these guys were armed. These were armed would be uh, burglars. And the man, he had a concealed carry permit and it was revoked just days after he used this firearm to defend himself and his family from these would be robbers um, outside of their home in Los Angeles. So, to say the very least, it is extremely backward when we have laws that interfere with the ability for law-abiding citizens to defend themselves against criminals. It's backwards. I don't understand why we're penalizing this guy. We took away his CCL when he's a law-abiding citizen and he's defending himself. So Ricci is his name, and he believes that the decision was actually made because he used the firearm against the criminals, and he used the firearm to protect his family. However, the sheriff's department, they're saying that that's not the reason why they took his CCL away. It's not because you used the firearm, sir. It's actually because you yelled at a few officers of ours who showed up to investigate several days after the incident occurred. Now, Vince, I mean, at this point, he's a victim of a crime. And you can't get mad at victims for yelling, okay? He's a victim of a crime. He had to pull out a gun on somebody in order to protect himself. That causes some stress, and maybe he expresses his stress in a certain way where he yelled at these officers. But like I said, they didn't give him the keys to the city. They took away his gun permit because he yelled at some officers after being attacked, which is a completely normal response from a victim. Yelling, crying. This is a joke. Drivers yell at cops all of the time. And I mean, the cops don't have the power to take away their driving privileges, right? So, I mean, this is a joke. It's a joke. And we're going to chat a little bit about that. Plus, these four suspects. Now, there's 8 suspects, but only 4 of them are in custody. These people um, are are charged with this beating, and they are being looked at as possibly being charged as adults. This happened in Las Vegas. Jonathan Lewis. This is a really hard story for me to cover. It's tough. The video went viral. It circulated on the internet where a bunch of black teens beat this white teen um, brutally. It was about 10 or 12 of them. Now, they say that they've got 8 suspects and they've only got 4 in custody. So they're not doing that great of a job. The cops, when it comes to this case with Jonathan Lewis. Um, but yeah, they've got these 4 suspects. Now they're thinking that these 4 suspects are going to be charged as adults. And it gets even wilder. So Jonathan Lewis, we know that this white kid, he was actually trying to stick up for a smaller friend. But it gets even more petty than that. And there's a statement that the father makes, Mr. Lewis, Jonathan Lewis Sr. He makes a statement, and I think it's a very important statement. So we're going to talk about that. If you're watching, smash the like button right now. Hit that like button. Good morning. Hey, this is the Morning Buzz. And coming up in just a little bit, we are going to be unpacking this beating that took place in Las Vegas against a teenager. He was a white teen. His name's Jonathan Lewis. And they've got 4 suspects in custody. Now, they've got 8 overall suspects, but they've only got 4 of them in custody. And these 4 suspects are possibly going to be charged as adults. So I've got that story plus Michelle Blessent, Bloomington. He used to go by the name James Blessent. Now he changed that up a bit. He was indicted on 3 new charges over the weekend, and I'm going to be unpacking this for us because the Bloomington Police Department actually referred to Michelle as a woman in their press release, and there was a bit of confusion because I mean, you look at the mugshot, clearly not a woman. Okay, Michelle Blessent does not look like a woman. He looks like a man. And you're like, wait a second, this isn't a woman. And then you dig in deeper and you realize, wow, he is actually identifying as a woman. And I'm speculating, of course. I don't know. But I would, I'm speculating that he is not actually somebody who truly believes that he's a woman. He says that he's a woman. He changed his name to Michelle Blessent. He claims to be a woman. We know he's not, right? His chromosomal makeup, he has XY chromosomes. Um, his name is James Blessent, was James Blessent. Now he legally changed that name to Michelle. But I really do believe that Michelle, James, whatever you want to call him, I believe that he's trying to avoid being housed with female inmates or avoid being housed with male inmates. I think he wants to be housed with female inmates because of the nature of the crime. So I'm going to chat a little bit about that. We've got so much to get to. This Los Angeles homeowner defending his family from armed criminals. Now, the LAPD actually revoked his gun permit. That happened. So the Constitution, you and I both know, it's proof that we have this little thing. It's an inalienable right to self-defense. You have the right to bear arms, and that shall not be infringed. The Constitution is pretty flippin' clear on that. But despite all that, it's becoming increasingly clear that in these progressive run cities, normal. I've had Chad Burke in here. We talked about how he was arrested because he defended himself against this man who stabbed him 19 times. Chad Burke didn't do the stabbing. He actually defended himself using jujitsu. But yet he was arrested. The judge in that case, said, "We're sorry that the justice system did this to you, Mr. Burke, and that you had to go through this." Anyway, progressive run cities, normal. This is LAPD in this instance, but it happens here. It happens in your community where people who defend themselves are are penalized, and they have no right to actually protect themselves against criminals who cause them harm or could cause them harm. So this man, he actually has a CCL, concealed carry, and it was revoked just days after he used that firearm to defend himself and his family from would-be robbers outside of his home in Los Angeles. So this is extremely backwards when we've got laws that interfere with your ability as a law-abiding citizen to defend yourself against criminals. We've got backward laws across the state of Illinois, United States, right here. Normal is backwards. So Vince Ricci is his name, and he made the decision to protect his family using a gun. And the sheriff's department claim now that they didn't take away his CCO uh, because he used the firearm. They're saying they took away his CCL because he yelled at officers who showed up to investigate several days after the incident occurred. Now, Vince, mind you, he's a victim of a crime. Okay. When officers come up and they start investigating, start poking their nose around, maybe, just maybe, because he's a victim of a crime, he's in shock and he reacts in a way that's probably not normal. It's probably because he's a victim of a crime. Anyway, instead of LAPD thanking him for his valiant effort, they decided to revoke his gun permit. And the reason why they revoked his gun permit was because he yelled at some officers. Okay, big whoop. Drivers yell at cops all of the time, and they don't have their driving privileges revoked from them. Okay, so let me get this straight. Officers, they didn't like a stern talking to, and now they've attempted to strip away somebody's Second Amendment. Okay, so since when do the officers have power to do that? They don't. Okay, this is a joke. Uh, Vince, the guy, he says, "After successfully defending my home and my family and my 5-month-old child, California has now decided to suspend my Second Amendment rights." According to the Daily Mail, Vince previously blasted the Los Angeles officers for sloppy police work. So no wonder Vince is peeved off. He was almost killed by these would-be robbers, and his family could have been killed by these would-be robbers because California is so soft on crime. Okay, so this has been pent up. No wonder he's frustrated with the officers. In June, his house was actually broken into. In May, his car was broken into. November 3rd, just one day prior to the shootout, he saw multiple criminals driving around without license plates on the back of their cars. And he said that they were targeting homes in the area, these unlicensed cars. So this is pent up aggression. He's upset because nobody is enforcing the law in California. So he's probably peeved off with the officers and yelled at them because they're doing sloppy police work. And Vince, he was called a hero by the NRA. The National Rifle Association defended his use of the gun, and they were upset with the fact that he was stripped of his ability to carry that gun by the LAPD. So here's the statement of the NRA spokesperson. They said his decisive actions to protect his wife and his daughter embody the core principles that the NRA members fight for every day. Then he goes on, he says it's reprehensible that California is shredding his Second Amendment rights up after he defended his family. Governor Gavin Newsom and Gascon, who is the state's attorney there in LA, um, their pro-criminal policies have transformed Los Angeles and the wider state into what resembles a war zone. The NRA stands with Vince and every responsible gun owner in California, firmly committed to defending their rights to protect their families and their communities. The right to self-defense should ensure that all potential victims have the ability to protect themselves, and that that's something that police officers should actually be empowering citizens. We should be empowering citizens to do that, because guess what? The response times suck. 30 minutes, I think, on average for a California police officer to get to your call. Okay. And it's even worse in places like Chicago. But these officers in LA, I don't think that they're aware that this right to self-defense, it's not bestowed on Americans by the grace of city officials. No, no, no. These are rights bestowed by God. So you don't get to take these away. And the citizens, it's not your responsibility to take these rights away. It's disgusting that police officers who took an oath to uphold and protect the Constitution, they're holding somebody's right to self-defense hostage. Hostage. Okay, I do have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm gonna unpack a couple more stories. I do want to get to Michelle Blessent. I'm probably going to cover this one. He used to go by the name James. It's in Bloomington here. He's got 3 new charges. The police referred to him as Michelle and as a woman, but he is biologically, I believe, a man. He used to go by the name James. I think he's trans, but they're being very shh about this, the Bloomington Police. Now he's got 3 more charges. He's been in custody at the McLean County Detention Facility. More on that story next. See, I get it, Bob. What did he say to the police officers when he yelled at the police officers? This guy out of LA, the LA homeowner. I mean, maybe that would make a difference, but not really. Okay, so this is a right to self-defense. Now, whatever he says to the officers, they can't. That you can't take that gun away. I mean, he could. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just. You can't take that right away. It's bestowed by God, and they're holding his right to self-defense hostage. If you're watching, go ahead and smash the like button. We're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. Good morning. Hey, this is the Morning Buzz. Thanks so much for joining me. And we're going to be talking about the Bloomington Police, referring to this guy as a girl, or this guy as a girl, as a woman. And they referred to him as Michelle in their press release. Now, I do believe that he legally changed his name to Michelle. And he used to go by the name James. Now, he's been indicted on 3 new charges. Now, he had all kinds of charges in April. So, we're going to go over his original charges involving his first victim in this investigation with 5 counts of predatory criminal sexual assault. A wild story, folks. We're going to be right back. Cities 92.9. Michelle Blessent. Got to talk about him. He used to go by the name James Blessent, and now recently Michelle has been indicted on 3 new charges. Transgender, I suppose. It was kind of odd because the Bloomington Police, they sent out a press release. They referred to him as a woman, but then you look at the picture and you're like, that's not a woman. There's no way. Then you do some digging, and we did some digging back in April on this when he was originally charged involving the first victim in this investigation with 5 counts of predatory criminal sexual assault of a victim under 13. Now, there's new charges. So there's new charges. It's the same. It's predatory criminal sexual assault of a victim under 13. I'm assuming that this is a new victim in this investigation. Then they also charge him with grooming and exploitation of a child less than 17. I got to double check. Maybe it's the same victim, but he was already charged with 5 counts of criminal sexual assault of a victim under 13 back in April. So they've added on new charges. Now, I don't know if it pertains to the same victim or if it's a new victim. We're going to double check on that, but this is just in. He gets 3 new charges. He's indicted on 3 new charges. So he remains in custody at the McLean County Detention Facility. Whether he's being housed with the female inmates or the male inmates, I don't know. All I know is that back in April, when his original charges, and when he was arrested in April and taken into custody, Brant Parsley told me that law enforcement, they're treating him like a woman because that's how Michelle Blessent identifies. Now, I've been to the McLean County jail. I've seen it. I went and I toured the women's side, and then I toured the men's side. Now, I didn't go into the men's side because I'm a woman. That's not allowed, according to them. So I don't know why a woman would be allowed or a man would be allowed in the woman's. I would imagine that that wouldn't be the case. I hope not. But 2 very different sides. So when I was at the women's side, they were quiet. They were kind of gathered around a table listening to this counselor speak. And then when I went over to the men's side, loud. Like the difference in volume was insane. It's just because men and women are different. And I noticed right away that they had a heavy, heavy black population in the McLean County Jail when it came to the male side. I wasn't allowed in, like I said, to go see their living quarters or anything like that. But they had this really nice gym in there and a pull-up bar and weights and things like that. So they were working out, they were yelling. It's a very different scene. And here's the thing. The nature of this crime. So allegedly Blessent raped a kid because that's what sexual assault is defined under the law here in Illinois, is that there's penetration or force of some kind. Now, he allegedly raped. I I get the feeling that he's actually not suffering from gender dysphoria, and he's just wanting to be housed with the women, because here's why. A crime of this nature, men, even criminals, have standards, okay? And when you rape a child, typically that's not looked at very favorably in the clink. Okay, you might get beat, you might get punched. Who knows? I don't think that the other inmates are going to really appreciate a child predator amidst them. So maybe that's why. I don't know. I have no idea. That's speculation, but either way, we should not be catering to this delusion and referring to a criminal by his preferred pronouns. We should treat him like the biological man that he is and throw him into the men's prison if he is in fact guilty of these things. He hasn't been charged or he hasn't been convicted yet, and they made it very clear in the BPD police or press release. All suspects are presumed innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. I get that, but I don't want to be treating this guy like a woman if he's not a woman. we're done for today. Catch me again tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's been Cities 92.9, The Morning Buzz.